pulled a gun to scare him off, and the gun, in reality, what really happened, the gun went off.
Johnny Paycheck's career didn't just stall, it came to a screeching halt in 1985. The night he pulled the trigger inside the North High Lounge in Hillsboro, Ohio, would live in infamy. The bullet grazed the victim's head, but that wasn't even the worst of it. At 47, Paycheck was living dangerously, carrying 2 loaded guns and wearing a bulletproof vest on stage. He was burning through $1.2 million while owing the IRS $300,000. His biggest hit played on the radio while he sat in rehab, unable to enjoy any of the success. By the time he died in 2003, alone in a hospital room, his son missed saying goodbye by just 20 minutes. This is the tragedy of the man who once embodied the outlaw spirit of country music. Johnny Paycheck, a country outlaw's fall from grace. Johnny Paycheck was born Donald Eugene Lytle on May 31, 1938, in Greenfield, Ohio. Growing up during the Great Depression, his family faced financial hardships, and his father worked multiple jobs just to make ends meet. The struggles of his early life shaped his music, full of raw emotion, heartbreak, and the harsh realities of life. Donald's early years were filled with restlessness and rebellion, and he channeled that into a lifelong battle with his demons. At 9 years old, Donald stepped onto a stage for the first time, singing Hank Williams' "Your Cheatin' Heart" and winning a $5 prize, about $60 today. But instead of saving the money, he spent it on candy and comic books. That impulsive spending would become a trademark of his wild lifestyle. His passion for music and heartbreak would continue to drive his story. At 15, Donald dropped out of school, hitchhiking across the Midwest to play in honky-tonks for loose change. Nights were spent in barns or under the stars, and he would lie about his age just to get into bars. Despite the chaos, he thrived in the rough environment of honky-tonk bars, learning the streets and the people who lived there. His experiences gave him an edge in his music. He didn't just sing about tough living. He had lived it. Donald joined the Navy at 17, hoping it would provide some structure, but his rebellious streak quickly caused trouble. After a commanding officer denied him leave to visit his dying grandmother, Donald lashed out and broke the man's nose. He was court-martialed and sent to military prison, where his distrust of authority began. It was also here that his music took root, as he learned to play guitar and write songs, eventually developing a style all his own. In 1958, he moved to Nashville with just $37 to his name. He slept in his car and washed dishes at night for 60 cents an hour. But by day, he was determined to meet anyone who could help him make it in the music business. That hunger paid off in 1960, when he recorded his first single, "Miracle of Love." Unfortunately, it sold only 847 copies, and Decca Records quickly dropped him. This early failure didn't break him, it strengthened him, setting the stage for his eventual breakthrough. By the early 1960s, Paycheck had worked his way up to being a session musician, playing bass for $3 an hour. He worked on hundreds of recordings, including demos for Tammy Wynette. In 1962, he joined George Jones's band, where he experienced both wild success and conflict. One night in Texas, a drunken fight ended with George leaving Donald stranded at a gas station. Despite these setbacks, the duo's chemistry was undeniable, and Donald's harmonies helped shape the sound of Jones's iconic songs. In 1964, Paycheck was still struggling to find his place. Though he played on hits like "The Race Is On" by George Jones, he received no credit and was paid a mere $50 a week. That betrayal fueled his desire to take control of his career. Later, he would become a pioneer of the outlaw country movement, writing songs that expressed his rebellious spirit and distrust of the system. In 1964, a broke and determined Donald Eugene Lytle walked into a courthouse in Greenfield, Ohio, wanting to reinvent himself. He wanted a name that fit the outlaw persona he was creating. He chose the name Johnny Paycheck, inspired by a Chicago boxer, but misspelled it on the paperwork. Instead of paying $25 to fix the mistake, he left it, and just like that, Johnny Paycheck was born. an icon of rebellion in the country music world. Outlaw country's tragic icon. Johnny Paycheck didn't just make headlines for his music, he became infamous for his destructive lifestyle. In 1985, a bullet grazed a man's head in a bar fight, but that wasn't even the worst thing he did that year. At 47, Paycheck was carrying loaded guns, wearing a bulletproof vest on stage, and spending money faster than he could make it. He was deep in debt, owing the IRS $300,000, yet his biggest hit played on the radio while he sat in rehab, unable to enjoy his success. By the time he died in 2003, alone in a hospital room, his son missed his final moments by just 20 minutes. This is the tragic story of a man whose life and legacy were as wild and unpredictable as the music he made. Born as Donald Eugene Lytle on May 31, 1938 in Greenfield, Ohio, Paycheck grew up during the Great Depression, which shaped his understanding of struggle and hardship. His father worked multiple jobs just to keep their family afloat, and this environment of scarcity would fuel Paycheck's rebellious nature. He was restless from an early age, and music became his escape, but his wild side often took over. At just 9 years old, he stepped onto a stage for the first time and sang Hank Williams' "Your Cheatin' Heart," winning $5, a fortune for a kid in 1947, though he spent it all on candy and comic books. This impulsive behavior became a trademark throughout his life. At 15, Paycheck dropped out of school and started hitchhiking across the Midwest, singing in honky-tonks for loose change. Most nights, he slept in barns or under the stars, lying about his age to get into bars. This was no ordinary childhood. It was the hard, rough world that would influence his outlaw country style. Paycheck learned to survive, read a room, and lived his life with the edge he would later bring to his music. He didn't just sing about hardship, he was living it. At 17, he joined the Navy, hoping for structure, but it didn't take long for him to clash with authority. After being denied leave to visit his dying grandmother, Paycheck broke a commanding officer's nose, was court-martialed, and ended up in prison. But prison was a turning point. Paycheck started playing guitar, writing songs, and meeting people who would shape his musical future. He came out of prison with a fire to make it in music, and by 1958, he had just $37 to his name when he arrived in Nashville. Paycheck slept in his car, washed dishes for 60 cents an hour, and snuck backstage at the Grand Ole Opry to shake hands with anyone who could help him. His big break didn't come easy, but by 1960, he recorded his first single, "Miracle of Love." The record sold just 847 copies, and Decca Records quickly dropped him. Rejection didn't stop him. It fueled him. Paycheck went on to become a session musician, learning the craft from the ground up, working with legends like George Jones and Tammy Wynette. But in 1964, Paycheck's frustration with the system grew. He was being paid $50 a week for his contributions to George Jones's hit "The Race Is On," but he got no credit or royalties. That betrayal became a driving force in his career, pushing him to fight for fair contracts and leading him to embrace the outlaw country persona that would define his music. In 1964, he legally changed his name to Johnny Paycheck, inspired by a Chicago boxer. He wanted a name that sounded like trouble, and that's exactly what he got. Paycheck embraced the bad boy image, and his career took off. His music spoke to the working man, the rebel, and the brokenhearted, and he quickly became known for his wild lifestyle. In 1965, Paycheck recorded A11 for Little Darlin' Records, and although it only climbed to number 35 on the charts, it earned him his first royalty check for $847. He spent the money recklessly, $600 on a Cadillac, $150 on flashy clothes, and the rest on a 3-day bender at Tootsie's Orchid Lounge. But the check didn't just buy him stuff, it gave him a belief that he could make it big. The next year, he wrote and recorded "The Lovin' Machine," a song so racy that 47 stations banned it across the Bible Belt. Paycheck didn't care. Controversy was good for business, and the song sold 89,000 copies. In 1967, Paycheck performed at the Grand Ole Opry, but his career hit a new low when he got drunk before taking the stage and vomited in the middle of his performance. The Opry banned him for 2 years, but the damage was done. Paycheck was no longer just an entertainer. He was chaos in boots. In 1971, Paycheck's relationship with producer Billy Sherrill became tense as Sherrill tried to add polish to Paycheck's raw sound. In one infamous moment, Paycheck threw his guitar through the studio window, causing $2,300 in damage. Yet, despite his wild behavior, Sherrill recognized Paycheck's talent, and together they recorded "She's All I Got" in 1970. Paycheck was so high on drugs and alcohol that he couldn't remember recording the song, but it hit number 2 on the charts. By the time "Take This Job and Shove It" became a massive hit in 1977, Paycheck was in rehab, unable to enjoy the success. His wild lifestyle continued, burning through millions of dollars on drugs, alcohol, and legal troubles. By 1990, he had filed for bankruptcy. Johnny Paycheck's story is one of brilliance, chaos, and self-destruction. His outlaw spirit made him a country music legend, but his personal demons kept him from ever truly finding peace. He left behind a legacy of anthems for the working man, but the price he paid for fame was steep. Outlaw country's fall from grace. Johnny Paycheck's life was a wild mix of genius, chaos, and self-destruction, a tragic reflection of how fame and addiction can tear a man apart from the inside out. By the late 1970s, he had become one of the most recognizable names in country music. His songs spoke to working-class Americans, to those tired of their bosses, to those who found solace in whiskey and heartbreak. But behind the sharp suits and outlaw image, his personal life was spiraling out of control. He married Sharon Ray, and together they had a son. For a while, it looked like Paycheck might finally find some peace. Sharon stood by him as his fame grew, helping manage the chaos that followed him everywhere. But fame didn't bring him happiness. It brought temptation. The same man who could command a stage couldn't control his own demons. Rumors of affairs began to surface almost immediately, the most shocking being an alleged relationship with a 19-year-old backup singer during their honeymoon. While the truth was never fully proven, the gossip alone was enough to drive a wedge through their fragile marriage. It didn't take long for everything to fall apart. Sharon tried to hold the family together as Paycheck's addictions deepened, but even her loyalty couldn't withstand the constant cycle of arrests, court dates, and scandal. In 1981, things took an even darker turn. While touring in Wyoming, Paycheck was arrested for statutory rape involving a 12-year-old girl. The accusation shook the entire country music industry. The headlines were brutal, the public disgust was immediate, and his reputation began to unravel. His lawyers worked out a plea deal that reduced the charges to a misdemeanor, sparing him from prison, but the damage was done. The girl's family filed a $3 million civil lawsuit, but before the case could go to trial, Paycheck declared bankruptcy, effectively freezing the legal process and escaping further consequences. For many, it looked like manipulation. For Paycheck, it was survival. The case was never resolved, and though he avoided prison, his image was forever scarred. As his personal life disintegrated, his behavior on stage became erratic and unpredictable. One infamous night in Detroit, he accused his band of stealing money from his dressing room. In the middle of the concert, in front of thousands of fans, he fired the entire band on the spot. The audience gasped as he continued the show alone, just him and a guitar under the harsh stage lights. From that night on, his concerts became unpredictable, half performance, half meltdown. Fans didn't know whether they'd see the brilliant performer who wrote "Take This Job and Shove It," or the paranoid, intoxicated man who muttered threats under his breath and sometimes forgot his own lyrics. By the early 1980s, paranoia had consumed him. Paycheck began showing up to gigs wearing a bulletproof vest, convinced that drug dealers and old business partners were trying to kill him. He talked openly about enemies plotting against him, even as he drank himself deeper into oblivion. The IRS was after him for unpaid taxes, more than $300,000 at one point, and his relationships with promoters and record executives had all but collapsed. The once celebrated outlaw was becoming a ghost of his former self, stumbling through shows, burning bridges, and pushing away anyone who tried to help. Then came the night that would define the rest of his life. On December 19, 1985, Johnny Paycheck walked into the North High Lounge in Hillsboro, Ohio, a small bar filled with regulars who knew him as the local legend who'd fallen from grace. After several drinks, he got into an argument with a man named Larry Wise. Words turned to shoving, and in a flash of rage, Paycheck pulled out a .22 caliber pistol and fired. The bullet grazed Wise's head, missing his skull by an inch. The bar erupted in chaos. As people screamed and ducked for cover, Paycheck stormed out, climbed into his gold 1983 Cadillac Eldorado, and sped off into the night. What followed was something out of a movie. He tore down State Route 62 at over 80 miles per hour, headlights flashing, sirens chasing behind. The pursuit stretched across 3 counties before it finally ended at a Flying J truck stop near Wilmington, Ohio. When state troopers approached, they found Paycheck slumped over the wheel, the engine still running, and the radio blasting his own song, "Take This Job and Shove It." On the passenger seat sat the pistol, still warm, and a half-empty bottle of Jack Daniels on the floor. His blood alcohol level was 0.24, 3 times the legal limit. When the officers woke him, he slurred something about defending his honor and claimed he was Johnny Cash's cousin. The entire arrest was caught on a local news crew's camera. The footage aired nationwide, cementing his fall from grace. The trial began on March 15, 1986, and from day one, Paycheck treated it like a circus. On the courthouse steps, he gave interviews as if promoting a new album. "Larry Wise had it coming," he bragged to reporters. "And if I had to do it over again, I'd probably aim better." That quote alone destroyed any chance of sympathy from the jury. Inside the courtroom, he interrupted lawyers, insulted the judge, and even stood up mid-proceeding to sing his own song before being silenced by bailiffs. The evidence was overwhelming. Security footage, ballistics, witness testimony. Larry Wise testified about his injuries, saying he still suffered from hearing loss and migraines. After just 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a guilty verdict. Paycheck was sentenced to 9 years and 7 months in prison. Prison stripped him of everything. The fame, the money, the entourage, all gone. Inside Chillicothe Correctional Institution, he was just another inmate, one with a target on his back. Some inmates idolized him. Others wanted to hurt him. One even tried to stab him with a sharpened toothbrush. To survive, he aligned himself with prison gangs, trading cigarettes for protection. He refused rehab, insisting he didn't need help. But in time, something inside him began to shift. The endless isolation, the fear, and the weight of his choices broke through his pride. In 1988, Paycheck said he found God. 2 years later, after suffering a heart attack in his cell, he began leading Bible studies and writing gospel songs. He gave talks to younger inmates about the dangers of fame and addiction. Whether it was genuine or a survival mechanism, something had undeniably changed in him. Then in January 1991, everything changed again. After serving just 22 months, Ohio Governor Richard Celeste granted him a pardon. Some say it was due to his supposed transformation. Others say it was because of overcrowding. Either way, Paycheck walked out of prison a free man. But freedom didn't mean redemption. Country music had moved on. Nashville didn't want a scandal-ridden ex-con. His old fans had grown older, and the younger generation barely knew his name. His debts still hung over him, more than $1.6 million owed to the IRS. When he finally booked his first post-prison concert, only 89 people showed up to a venue built for 2,000. Halfway through the set, overcome with emotion, he broke down crying on stage. He apologized to his fans. "I messed up," he said softly. "I'm sorry for letting you down." The crowd, what little there was, stood and applauded. In the years that followed, Johnny Paycheck clawed his way back inch by inch. He toured small-town venues, sang in church halls, and spoke to kids about drugs and temptation. He even managed to record a few new songs. Slowly, the country world began to forgive him. In 1997, in a moment few thought possible, the Grand Ole Opry officially inducted him as a member, a final nod to his influence and legacy. But behind the curtain, Paycheck's finances were in ruins. The IRS never stopped chasing him. He filed for bankruptcy in 1990, legally changing his name to John Austin Paycheck in a desperate attempt to reboot his career. It didn't work. His records stopped selling, his royalties disappeared, and by the end of the decade, he was broke. The man who once sang anthems of defiance was now struggling just to get by. His later years were quiet and sad. He lived mostly out of the spotlight, performing occasionally, preaching occasionally, trying to stay clean. The energy that once electrified audiences had faded, replaced by reflection and regret. Yet even in his darkest moments, his music lived on. Songs like "Take This Job and Shove It," "She's All I Got," and "Slide Off of Your Satin Sheets" remained timeless. They spoke to working people, to dreamers, to those who had made mistakes but kept fighting anyway, just like him. Johnny Paycheck's story is a haunting reminder of how thin the line is between fame and downfall. He had everything: the voice, the talent, the fire, but addiction, anger, and pride destroyed it all. And though he found redemption in the end, it came at a price few could endure. His life was a country song come to life, beautiful, broken, and unforgettable. The downfall of Johnny Paycheck. Johnny Paycheck's life is a story of chaos and heartbreak, one that unfolded both on and off the stage. His wild energy and outlaw persona captivated audiences, but the personal toll of his choices left a trail of destruction. Despite his success, the truth of his life outside the spotlight was far darker than anyone could imagine. Paycheck's scandals weren't just limited to his reckless behavior or the infamous Wyoming shooting. His personal life was a mess, riddled with affairs, legal issues, and a constant battle with his demons. His band members even told the police about the troubles he had with women and how he used his fame to escape consequences. In one instance, he was even removed from a flight for groping a flight attendant. Yet, despite his increasingly erratic behavior, other country stars continued to support him. George Jones and Merle Haggard paid his bail after the shooting, and Jerry Lee Lewis helped raise money for his legal fees. The country music industry shielded him from the consequences, but that protection wouldn't last forever. As Paycheck's behavior spiraled, the music industry began to distance itself from him. Labels no longer wanted their name associated with him, and one insider famously claimed they would make sure no one ever knew who Johnny Paycheck was. The man who had once been the face of outlaw country became a ghost, a shadow of his former self, hiding away on the West Coast, lost in alcohol and regret. By 1995, his health began to fail. Paycheck, who had once sung with the power of a lion, found himself struggling to breathe. Emphysema and severe asthma ravaged his body. His lungs, once the engine of his music, had been destroyed by years of smoking and drug use. He could no longer perform without the aid of an oxygen tank. His body had given up, but his spirit was still alive, though deeply frustrated by his inability to sing. On top of this, his finances had completely collapsed. In 1990, Paycheck filed for bankruptcy, with only $1,247 to his name. The IRS had placed a $300,000 lien on him. He had to sell his guitars, stage outfits, and everything he once valued. Friends and old bandmates started organizing benefit concerts just to help pay for his medical bills. The man who had once lived like a king was now struggling to survive. His final years were spent in a nursing home in Nashville, where he was hooked up to machines and barely able to speak. Visiting him was heartbreaking for his friends, who had once seen him as the outlaw star. The man who had filled arenas now lay in a hospital bed, fighting for every breath. He had lived his life fiercely, but in the end, he could barely hold on. Johnny Paycheck passed away on February 19, 2003, at the age of 64. He died alone in a hospital room, his son stuck in traffic and missing the chance to say goodbye by just 20 minutes. His lungs, battered by years of abuse, finally gave out. The cause of death was emphysema and asthma. At his funeral, more than 200 people gathered to pay their respect. Among them were country legends like George Jones, as well as members of the Hells Angels, who acted as pallbearers. The service was a reflection of the two worlds Paycheck had lived in, the country music industry and the outlaw lifestyle. George Jones gave a tearful eulogy, and in one final act of kindness, paid for Paycheck's burial plot. The songs Old Violin and Amazing Grace played in the background, a fitting tribute to the man who had lived a life of highs and lows, chaos and beauty. Johnny Paycheck's legacy is marked by his raw, unfiltered music and his tumultuous life. He was a man who lived hard, loved harder, and ultimately paid the price for both. Despite the darkness, his music continues to live on, a testament to the complex, flawed figure who could capture the essence of the working-class American experience. Johnny Paycheck's life story is a mix of triumph and tragedy, a wild ride from stardom to destruction. He rose to fame with his powerful music, but the battles off stage, addiction, violence, and legal chaos ultimately caught up with him. Yet even as his career fell apart, Paycheck remained a symbol of rebellion, a man who lived life on his own terms, no matter the cost. His story serves as a reminder of the price fame and excess can exact on those who dare to live without limits. Thanks for joining us on this journey through the life of Johnny Paycheck. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into the world of country music's most troubled stars, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. We'll see you next time with another story that's as raw and real as the music itself.